times are a little tougher these days.
Who came up with this idea?
I lost $3 billion. I gave away all my ether to my secretary. It was 293,000 ether. You see like the hyper-corporatization of the world where these big trillion-dollar companies are basically connecting all the resources of the world together, and they have total control over all of it. So your ability to succeed or fail is not where you're born, what language you speak, the merit. It just basically, are you friends with a small oligarchy of people or not? People are waking up to that. What I want to do is create a world where we can trust each other. Anything that improves trust in individuals, commercial outcomes, or institutions, this intrinsically makes the world a fundamentally better place. They've entered the space. They went from trying to kill us under the Biden administration to embracing us, and I see the writing on the wall. It's this embrace and extinguish. The elites are only elite as long as we allow them to be elite. When you look at the AI revolution, it's going to unemploy within America in the next 20 years probably over 100 million people. You got Elon Musk saying that Tesla's no longer going to be a car company, and he's going to build armies of robots, and you got all these AI companies where every version of Claude is putting structurally engineer after engineer out of business. Well, if you extrapolate that across the entire economy for the knowledge workers and the blue-collar workers, that means you'll have a 40-50% unemployment rate. Do you think like half of America is just going to be sitting at home unemployed, getting UBI, being happy, saying everything's great? They're just going to have
You don't think that's good?
Yeah, they're going to have a revolution. And they're going to tear down the economic system and build another system because they're not going to tolerate 5 trillionaires, an army of robots, and no one has anything and we're scraping by. Why would you create this world so that you can go and buy a private jet?
But throughout human history, it's everyone for themselves. They want to benefit themselves. You can't change that.
Oh my God, this is so good.
Today we have Charles Hoskinson. He is the CEO and founder of Input Output. Also, he's in a McDonald's suit. The company behind Cardano and also the co-founder of Ethereum.
Yeah. Times are a little tougher these days, and so we all have to pick up work where we can find it.
Who came up with this idea? This is genius.
I had some fun. The headlines came out because I told people my losses. I lost $3 billion over the last 5 years. And they said, so I started seeing memes of me in a McDonald's costume, and I was running around Japan for our Japan tour for midnight. And I said it would be a lot of fun to actually have a McDonald's uniform made. And so, Hong Kong's the city of tailors. So they were able to put this together in about a day.
Were you wearing this in Japan as well?
No.
Oh, just for this?
I kept it just for this event. It was like a surprise keynote.
This could be the best meme ever.
I think there's already a meme coin that's been created.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, this?
Probably.
Yeah,
okay. It wouldn't surprise me. It's either on Snec.fund or Pump.fund.
What is driving you? Why do you do what you do?
Well, I've been in the industry before there was any money in the industry, so it had to be philosophical because you couldn't make a living in it. I joined in 2010, and that was part of the Slashdot revolution. So there was a Slashdot article, and we all just kind of came in. Bitcoin was basically $1, and we were really interested in this idea of being our own bank, owning our own money, and having some control and agency over the digital world. If you look at how the whole digital world works step by step, there's all these middlemen and intermediaries that have total control over your experience on the internet. The search engines, the data aggregators, the data brokers, and in the financial world it's much the same. You have a bank account, and at any moment it can be shut down, it can be reversed. A lot of my friends, I grew up in Colorado, were in the marijuana industry, and they live in a cash economy. They can't get bank accounts. They're completely unbanked. So to me, it just made sense to say that money should be like the internet. It should be open and free, and there should be a system that's like email for money. You click a button and you just send it to people, they get it. It's irreversible, it's time-stamped. So that kind of created a love of this idea of Bitcoin. And at the same time, I was also a political firebrand. I was part of the Ron Paul campaign. He's a conservative politician in the United States, but he was a libertarian, and he believed in gold-backed money and humble foreign policy and all this other stuff. So I'd read all these books on Austrian economics and and the idea of having deflationary monetary systems. So you have like cryptography and cypherpunk and the old school deflationary monetary policy, and then this libertarian core of everybody can just do what they want to do and like push power to the edges. And Bitcoin was kind of the perfect revolution for all those things. So then I kind of grew up in that space, and so I started the Bitcoin Education Project, and then I created the first algorithmic stablecoin index with Dan Larimer. It was called BitShares, and it was way ahead of its time. Then we created Ethereum and, brought smart contracts in the space, and then we created Cardano, and now I got Midnight. And despite the fact it's been 15 years, I stay because we're making forward progress. There's 550 million people in the space, and we actually do have a tech stack that's going to give us the ability to bank the unbanked and to make everybody their own financial stack. And it's become even more necessary because of the AI revolution and more necessary because of the consequences of globalism than it was when I started in 2010. A lot of things that we were talking about, like, oh, they're hypothetical, and the people, it'll never happen. Well, like, actually, it did happen. The whole world got shut down with the lockdown, and then social media came, and people started getting deplatformed. You could be this incredible influencer with millions of fans, and then Google can just push a button, or Facebook can push a button, and you lose all of them, and you've been disintermediated from your relationship, as we saw a lot of people during COVID when that happened. And then you see like the hyper corporatization of the world, where these big trillion-dollar companies are basically connecting all the resources of the world together, and they have total control over all of it. So your ability to succeed or fail is not where you're born, what language you speak, the merit. It's just basically, are you friends with a small oligarchy of people or not? So people are waking up to that, and they're saying we need to do something about it. And crypto is the only option for these types of things. So that's why I do what I do. I've made billions, lost billions. I've been to 75 countries. I've met kings and regular people in the trenches, farmers in Ethiopia. It didn't really matter. The passion's still there, and the excitement's still there. And every year the technology gets better, and we get closer and closer to that shining city on a hill.
When you first started, was there a personal story that made you care about this issue? Because a lot of people know about this. They don't care.
Well, one, I used to eat at this one restaurant, and the gal who was the waitress was here illegally, and her husband was here illegally. One day she came in crying, and I said, well, what's wrong? And she said her husband was just robbed by the police. And I said, what do you mean? And so he was a drywaller, and he'd done a month's worth of work. He got paid in cash, and he got pulled over by police officers, and they just simply took the cash. It's called civil asset forfeiture. And that's basically legal theft. It happens. There's billions of dollars a year in civil asset forfeiture. So I was younger, and I was like, that can't be illegal. And I looked into it, and it was a surprisingly huge thing. I say police officers are pulling over a drywaller and just straight up taking his money in the United States of America. This is not like the Soviet Union or something like that, or North Korea. This is America. Shouldn't happen. So you see stuff like that. The 2008 financial collapse, and none of the bankers went to jail. Obama got elected. He's like, hope and change, or we're going to do it. And then he put the bankers in charge, and too big to fail got bigger. And also just the increase of the debt. When I started college, the U.S. national debt was about $4.5 trillion. It was quite big, but it was going down. And then now it's $38 trillion. But every generation of my life, every era of my life, it keeps going up and up and up and up. Global debt's $233 trillion. And so I look at those things and I said, there's just no way this is sustainable. And I see the real life consequences because I know a lot of people that are now retired, and I watched how they lived their life and how they saved, and they really did everything you were supposed to do. And now half of the retirement's been wiped out. Not the number went down or anything. It's just the buying power went down because of inflation. So those are the types of things that give me a great passion. It says the financial system's immoral, bankrupt, and wrong. And we need to correct and change that. So I said, all right, well, the only way we can do it is build our own money. We keep being promised every year, elect this person or do this thing or put this person in power, and they'll take care of us. And it's like, at what point do we realize that it's all a lie? They'll never take care of us because they always just become part of the system. They say, don't be evil, and then they just remove that mission statement. The only way you can constrain people is to go to can't be evil. You have to build systems that by their construction have integrity within them. And if you do that, then you start getting trust, truth, and honesty again. So small formative experiences, they accumulate up. And the more you travel, the more confirmation. Because everywhere you look, you find the pockets of corruption. Everywhere you look, you find the laws that don't make sense. And every industry's got some major problem, whether it be my clinic, because I run a healthcare business as well. We have 18,000 patients and dealing with insurance companies and billing, or it be work that we do. And I have a bison ranch and just dealing with the price of hay. There's always some nepotism and corruption where you look for it and you say, I just want to live in a world of fairness and one common set of rules, and everybody has to play by them. And I could verify the things that people are telling me are true. And that's the promise of blockchain.
That sounds like a system-level problem and misaligned incentives. You talked about that too. But if you want to design a new system, how do you make sure that the new designer won't misalign?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the power of self-evolving systems. You know, you're never going to get it right initially, but the question is, can the system, like biological systems, adapt and change so that the original intent of the system is preserved? So cryptocurrencies are a phenomenal example of that. They're built to be anti-fragile, so they get hit. You know, when I was growing up in the industry, Mt. Gox was always a big existential question. It's one of the reasons we created BitShares. We said, oh God, you know, we're going to have a situation where somebody who trades 80% of all the Bitcoin volume is going to collapse. If that does, I guess Bitcoin's dead. And yet not only did the system survive that, it thrived and grew and became better because the social dynamics were built in a way that the system was anti-fragile. So there are certain design principles in complex adaptive systems that you can put in that create those properties. The second thing is you have to be very good at competition. The reason why a lot of these things are bad in life is they get monopolies or oligarchies and you can't displace them or fire them. You know, and that could be with political parties, or you know, that can be with economic systems, that can be with technology. You know, when Microsoft was king of the world in the 90s and early 2000s, tech got very stagnant because everything was about preserving and protecting the monopoly of Microsoft as opposed to innovation. And then other people came, they competed, they built new things, and suddenly Microsoft said, oh my gosh, we have to actually innovate again or else we're going to die as a company. So competitive equilibria are really important as well. Not only do you have anti-fragility, but you have many different standards and you let them fight each other. So Ethereum makes Cardano better. Cardano makes Ethereum better. Midnight makes the rest of these guys better. We all bring something new and different to the table, and by doing that, what that provides is a basis upon which we can evolve. And third is community participation. You have to have participatory governance. If people are civically involved and they have incentives to be involved, they have ownership in the system. It's called the IKEA effect. You know, if you buy something from IKEA, you build it, you tend not to throw it away, even though it's not very good, because you built it. You know, it's like, I can't throw that. I had a friend who built a couch, and he's like, I can't throw that away. It's like, you've had it for 30 years. I don't care, man. I got it. I built that thing. I got cuts in my hand and everything. So people feel a lot of value in a system if they feel ownership and equity inside that system. When you look at a lot of failed political systems, there's this us versus them or otherism where I didn't build that system, I'm not connected to that system, and therefore the system's evil and wrong, but I have no accountability, responsibility, or connection. Cryptocurrencies are intrinsically participatory. What makes Cardano great isn't me, it's that we have a decentralized government. We have DREPs and a constitution, and we have constitutional amendments and all these things, and a budget process that's participatory. And people in more than 100 countries participate. So every single person says, I built part of Cardano. I'm part of this ecosystem. And that's what makes it strong. And then you end up getting a wisdom of the crowds effect where bad ideas, they tend to fizzle out over time. And good ideas, they tend to get stronger over time. And then eventually you adopt that. And I'd say the fourth thing is you have to be merciless about product market fit. You have to say, well, what problems are we actually trying to solve? If you tell a consumer you're going to do X, but you actually do Y, then they start burning out a little bit. That's the issue the cryptocurrency space is having right now. We went and promised that we're revolutionaries and we're going to change the entire world, and instead we got dog with hat. You know, and so we had meme coin mania and the NFT mania and all this other stuff. And people say, well, that's great, but what you've done is you've just created this magic engine to over-financialize all things. Everything becomes a token. Everything becomes a prediction market. In fact, I just delivered a keynote with this McDonald's uniform on. As soon as I was leaving Snack.Fun, somebody launched a meme coin of me with the uniform on. It's already a $100,000 market cap. So it just shows you like what we do as an ecosystem. And when retail investors and retail holders are told, wait a minute, this is supposed to be revolutionary and change the world, they don't feel that meaningful connection to it. So the narrative becomes bankrupt. So you have to have product market fit and narrative consistency within the system, and people have to see and feel the power and value that the system provides. Now, certain jurisdictions already feel this. I have employees in Argentina. We have a lovely big office in Buenos Aires. It's a wonderful place to be. And they refuse to be paid in the peso. They want to be paid in cryptocurrencies. Yeah. And I've paid them for years in it. There's $100 billion in cryptocurrencies in Argentina, and their economy is only $700 billion. So wow. 1 out of every $7 is in crypto, and they're probably going to be one of the first countries with private money because of the directionality there. So why do they do that? Because if they hold the peso, they lose 20% of their value a month. If they hold crypto, it stays stable. even Bitcoin is a lot more stable than the peso.
Definitely.
So it makes perfect sense for them to actually create a parallel economy and do these types of things. So you have to find those product market fits. And where and when you can do that with good governance, and you can do that with competitive equilibria, and you can do that with the right founding principles and the anti-fragility, you could build systems that over time, they conquer the world, regardless if a particular person dies or a law is passed or any of these things, because they're just simply stronger than any of the current governance systems we have.
You know, when I try to express or explain what blockchains are to beginners, I use this analogy of highway, right? But it seems like Cardano and what you're building is so much bigger than that. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it an infrastructure?
Yeah, what I want to do is create a world where we can trust each other. I don't think people really understand the negative consequences of a lack of trust. So I'll give you an example. I own a ranch in Wyoming, and every now and then I buy some of the neighbors because I need to build a road or my bison need grazing or whatever. So let's say I like the neighbor and have a good relationship with him, and I go and say, hey, I need to buy part of your ranch. Oh, they say, all right, come on over, and bring a bottle of whiskey. You get shit-faced drunk, and you talk about it, and you shake hands, and then you have a deal, and then maybe a month into it, you find out his brother owns part of it, and like he didn't have permission or whatever.
Right.
So you bring the brother together, you get shit-faced drunk again, and you figure it out, and then after 2 meetings, two drinking sessions, you figured it out. You buy the land, you're done. That's the transaction. That's a trusted transaction. Now let's play the counterfactual. Let's say I don't like the brother. I don't like him. Okay, I come in, I don't talk to him. My lawyer calls him up. My lawyer talks to his lawyer. They hardball negotiate for 2-3 months. We sign a deal. Turns out the brother owns part of it. Well, I feel screwed in that. So what happens? I litigate. So then we have 2 years of lawsuits, and we're going back and forth. And then eventually I win, and I get the land. It's the same outcome. I got the land. The difference is lots of money, lots of time, and a lot of heartache. And the only delta between the two is trust in that relationship. Do you trust the person, not trust the person? So anything that improves trust in individuals, commercial outcomes, or institutions, this intrinsically makes the world a fundamentally better place. And really what blockchain's about is restoring trust in commerce at its core. When you think about Bitcoin or what have you, the first use case of Bitcoin was irreversibility, no chargebacks. When you're at e-commerce, you're a merchant buying stuff online, all the time you have people with credit card fraud or all these other issues. They buy, you think you have the money, it turns out it was stolen credit card or it's a chargeback or something like that. Well, with Bitcoin, I get it, it's mine, I can't reverse it. So already it was intrinsically superior from an e-commerce viewpoint than credit cards were. So suddenly I could trust it. I don't care if you bought it and you live in Uganda. I don't care if you bought it and you live in Argentina. It's like cash. You've already paid me. I've actually received the full amount. There's no fraud or risk in this transaction. I've been paid. So I can trust you now in ways I couldn't trust you before. And then as you look at the evolution of the field, as we go into the second and third generation, now into the fourth generation, what we're doing is broadening the scope of things that I can trust you with. In fact, the most exciting part, what Midnight's working on right now, is this concept of selective disclosure. So you say, okay, we overshare. We come in and you say, all right, I need to do business with you. Are you a accredited investor or not? Are you a U.S. resident or not? Or, is this pre-tax or post-tax money or whatever the heck the questions are? Ordinarily how I prove that is I give you all these documents that are very revealing. I give you my passport. I give you my financial records. I give you residency information. You didn't ask that question. You just asked, are you part of this group or this group? Are you in the group or out of the group? It's a yes-no question. So that the minimum viable disclosure is just a zero-knowledge proof. So in a global system, if you could move to a selective disclosure system, then all of a sudden I can do business with pretty much anyone, anywhere. I collect almost no information about those people, and yet I fully trust them inside that relationship. And I know that it's a low fraud issue. I know it's a safe transaction, settlements compliance. I'm not going to have a lawsuit over it. I'm not going to have a regulatory event. Well, that means that commerce can travel at the speed of thought, which is that email for money idea that we had. Well, if it works at the individual level, it works at the business level. Toyota would love to work with Chinese car companies. They run at 1/3 the cost. They have armies of brilliant engineers. They're growing exponentially. So if they collaborate on technology and market, they could make billions of dollars. But how does Toyota trust that Chinese car company not going to steal their software or their logistics change or these other things? What recourse do they have if they do? So they can't get there, so that collaboration is difficult, and the failure of that collaboration costs them billions of dollars of potential money. And at the nation state level, nation states all the time want to work together, like the United States and Venezuela. There's been a change in management. If they can find a way to make a deal, you can open up one of the largest oil economies in the entire world and upgrade them from 3 million barrels a day to 10 million in production, and U.S. oil companies can make tens of billions of dollars. But we can't trust the Venezuelan government right
But how
now.
does Midnight change that?
Because it's all compositional. So each step of the way, it's about building up blocks and say, okay, well, what information are we going to share? How does dispute resolution work? If there's a bad outcome, how do we get restitution for that bad outcome? And compositionally, you build your way up. So Toyota and that car company say, okay, I know that if I share this data, it's going to be kept private and they can't steal it. And I know that when I say erase it, it's automatically erased because a confidential compute cluster has it and it can't leave the boundary. So the intellectual property theft doesn't happen. I know that when a person's working, it's a pre-vetted employee because I've already verified that that person's trusted and it's not some new contractor that magically appeared from a third-party company and suddenly they're getting access to all of our documents or things like that. So it's compositionally a hard problem, but you start at the individual level, that same question of, am I allowed to do business with you or not? And then you work your way up to the company level, and then eventually you can work your way up to the country level. And each step of the way, you have more privacy-enhancing technologies and more disclosure regimes, but eventually you get to a point where things can be built. And what's cool is you can use a lot of the techniques we've built in the cryptocurrency space to create economic certainty. Like, for example, Venezuela absolutely could go and renationalize the oil fields, but, Ethereum pioneered bonding and slashing. So if they do that, what if they burn $50 billion in assets? So yes, they can seize something, but then they would lose $50 billion in liquidity or something like that in the process of doing it. So then I, as an investor, would say, well, as long as the value is below that burn and slash amount, I feel safe because it's not rational for them to go and do that. I have an insurance policy for these types of things. Then suddenly we can trust each other for the first time ever and build that infrastructure for the first time ever. So that's really what blockchain provides, is it's a mechanism for us to trust each other. The first generation was about a trusted bulletin board that what went in it was time-stamped, immutable, and auditable, and we created a common account amongst everybody. It happened. Even though we may hate each other and we speak different languages and we live in different places, we can't disagree on the order of operation and facts. We say this is a common history that we have. Then we built transaction systems, and then we built programmability so you can transact arbitrary value. And now we're starting to get to those more complicated things, which is selective disclosure, and then that gives us another piece of the puzzle. Now it takes decades and decades in alternative governance systems and new economics and these things to be able to fully sort it all out, but every step of the way you gain more and more business you can do, and you bring more and more customers in for the type of business you can do. And it could be as small as a trading card game like the next Pokemon. I would like some assurances that the special cards that I get are actually special and they're not overprinting them and they're actually rare. Mm-hmm. I was a beta tester for Magic the Gathering and I had a Black Lotus. I'd like to know, these types of things. And it could be as complicated as, lithographs with an artist, and you want to make sure that the artist only ever produces 12 of those lithographs or something like that. It's the same technology stack for these types of things. And what's so cool about it is the smart cow effect. So only one person in the industry has to solve and open source the problem. And then once they've done that, everyone has access to it. We solved the blockchain trilemma with Ouroboros Laos. Within 18 months of launching that this year, everybody will probably take our design or our ideas and integrate it into their blockchain. Vitalik and the rest of the gang, they solve smart contracts. Now everybody has smart contracts, right? It's not a competitive differentiator. At the time in 2014, it certainly felt that way. We were quite happy with it. But no longer is that the case. The same for on-chain governance. We built this amazing on-chain governance system, as did Tezos and and Polkadot for Cardano. But that's not a competitive differentiator in 18 to 36 months because people take that. So it's hard for me because I have to keep building to stay relevant and innovate. But it's great for the industry as a whole because we all learn from each other and grow from each other, and we find new ways to bring new businesses in.
2025年底 Bitget 交易所正式成为了全景交易所 Universal Exchange UEX， 只要手上有 USDT 呢，就可以在同一个界面交易全球各种优质的资产，包含了主流加密货币、链上资产、美股代币、外汇、黄金、白银、贵金属、大宗商品、指数， 还有24个小时交易的股票合约，把这个资金的流动性用到极致，无缝跨资产套利，不用转账或者是在好多个账户里面切换，速度更快，成本更低。现在就点击下方资讯栏，立刻开始体验超丝滑的全球优质资产交易。
When you want to change the whole system, there has to be people that, are not happy about it. For example, banks or traditional finance were not happy about blockchain and crypto and revolution. Do you have that now? Like people that don't like what you're doing?
Well, I mean, they're certainly happy. Canton is right over there, so the banks are coming and building their own thing. Everybody finds a way to make money in it. Where I get pissed off is when they try to change the rules to screw us. I don't have any problem competing with BlackRock or Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan. What I have a problem is when they form their own consortia, then they go to the regulator and try to change the laws to ban non-custodial wallets and ban the decentralized aspects and ban DeFi and all these other things so that all the business is forced by law to go to them. I think that's where the friction points come. It has to be a fair game. And let the consumer decide, let the experience decide, let the value decide. It can't be a rigged game where no matter what the consumer wants, they basically are told or mandated for their protection to go to a cartel that basically has no concern about cost or consumer protections or any of these other things. So they've entered the space. They went from trying to kill us under the Biden administration to embracing us. And I see the writing on the wall. It's this embrace and extinguish. And we see a lot of these bank coins and Fedi coins working their way in. And they're permission consortia. You can't join them. It's permission only. And they're using their network effect to kind of push people through. I think we can still win because we have the world on our side. But it just makes the job a little bit harder in a nutshell. And also these banks, there's nothing they stand for. At the end of the day, they say, we just want to make slightly more money and be slightly faster. Mm-hmm. Whereas here, I'm saying, hey, I want you to be your own bank, and I want you to be in control of your freedom of association, commerce, and expression. I want you to actually live a life where you can trust people and work well with people. I want to give you governance systems. You can write your own constitution, and you can collaborate with people in 100 countries. There's so much more richness in that world than the transaction now is slightly faster and slightly cheaper, but it's exactly the same. Oh, and by the way, if the government doesn't like you, they can push a button and anytime shut off your money. It's like, why would you create this world so that you can go and buy a private jet or something like that?
But throughout human history, it's everyone for themselves. They want to benefit themselves. You can't change that, can you?
Well, but we have been. Throughout human history, we created religion and governments and all kinds of things. And we went from small tribes and nomads to, building cities and building much more elaborate social structures. And each generation, because of that collaboration, it's been getting better for people. My great-grandparents, they grew up in a time that when you had 8 kids, 4 of them died before the age of 20. And now we live in a time where it's almost unheard of for somebody to have several kids die. We take clean drinking water for granted, but the vast majority of the world throughout human history didn't have it. I once visited some Roman ruins in England, and one of the things that was most striking is when they were taking a look at the latrines where the late legionaries were there, all of the latrines were filled with tons of parasites because all the Roman legionaries were infected. Well, modern medicine's there, and that's a collection of collaboration. So I think deep down inside, I agree with Steven Pinker and these other people that the better angel of our nature, we want to do a good job. We want to help people. The problem is, because we can't trust people, we run into a situation where we default to the Nash equilibria and we just become adversarial and we become cynical and then we just go tribal again and we try to find our group and fight. So what you do is you defeat that with good technology and you slowly work your way through. Like if we have this selective disclosure system and it works its way through the government, the Epstein files aren't an issue. Because no matter what they redact, the real names come out and they get selectively disclosed. And then you say, well, yeah, it's actually verified from the DOJ. Somebody within it leaked it, but no one can prove it. So you don't have a Snowden situation. They can stay anonymous but still reveal these things. So it calls truth to power, and then you can slowly but surely get to a more honest society. The other thing is governance innovations bring more people into participation. So we used to live in a world of strongmen and kings, and then democracy and republics come, and you kind of have like an elite ruling class, and then kind of like an oligarchical finance class, and then an everyday people. So it's not quite democratic, like America's not really democratic, but at least more people get to participate. You can imagine this idea that Obama can grow up as a poor kid in Hawaii and be the president of the United States one day. That would have never happened in a monarchical system. When you have better governance systems like a DAO system or any of these other structures, more and more people participate in the governance. More and more people, eventually it gets much more fair and much more balanced in it. And what's cool about the cryptocurrency space is we're doing this in real time, that smart cow effect. It wasn't too long ago that the only thing the DAO was like a venture capitalist firm that was decentralized. And now we have new voting systems, and we're exploring ZK quadratic voting and soul-bound tokens and preference orderings and all kinds of cool new things that have never seen their way. Like in Cardano, we did liquid feedback, liquid democracy. This was a proposal from the Pirate Party in Sweden 20 years ago. No one ever put it into production. We put it in for the DREP system of Cardano. So political scientists can now look at scale for a network of 1.4 million people and say, wow, there's now actually a liquid democracy system running. What happened with it? Did it produce a good outcome, a bad outcome, whatever? Well, that system can be combined with soul-bound tokens or ZK quadratic voting or all these other things, and then we may end up with a situation where you get 80% voter participation instead of 5%. So people are much more engaged. At some point, small nation states say, we should use that. And then larger nation states say, we should use that. Corporate governance, they say, I'm going to build a company and that's how I want to govern my company. And they push through. Well, over time, what that does is it changes the entire world. And then when you have more participation from the bottom, you don't end up having these power structures that are totally unaccountable and they're against the people. They end up taking over. The other thing is the elites are only elite as long as we allow them to be elite. And they tend to be fragile, and that's why they get so violent. When you look at the AI revolution, it's going to unemploy within America in the next 20 years probably over 100 million people. You got Elon Musk saying that Tesla is no longer going to be a car company, and he's going to build armies of robots. And you got all these AI companies where every version of Claude is putting structurally engineer after engineer out of business. And that, like 70% of all the code being written right now for Anthropic is by Anthropic's products, not its engineers. At one point, it's going to probably be 95%. So that means I don't need 1,000 engineers anymore. I need 50 engineers to do the same amount of labor. Well, if you extrapolate that across the entire economy for the knowledge workers and the blue-collar workers, that means you'll have a 40-50% unemployment rate. So do you think like half of America is just going to be sitting at home unemployed, getting UBI, being happy, saying everything's great? Idle hands do the devil's work. They're just going to have
You don't think that's good?
Yeah, they're going to have a revolution. And they're going to tear down the economic system and build another system because they're not going to tolerate 5 trillionaires, an army of robots, and no one has anything and we're scraping by. They're just not going to do it.
Something Elon Musk said, we do not need to save for retirement anymore because of AI.
Yeah. And if you really dig into what he's getting at, there's two outcomes. Either you create unlimited abundance and everybody gets the fruits of their labors, but in a capitalist system that doesn't happen, or the whole economic system comes collapsing down and we're going to reset the system and we'll move to a post-capitalist society. So what does that society look like? It's probably going to be inspired a lot by what we've learned in the cryptocurrency space. We've experimented with so many different things: inflation, demurrage, universal basic income, airdrops, this thing, that thing. We've run real-time 400 different ways of running a central bank. And usually when you experiment with these things, you do it years to decades to centuries in nation states. We do it in competition with tens of thousands of different standards, weeks to months. So the data that we have from this 550 million person social experiment is very significant. And I do believe that we can leverage that to rebuild the economic order to a much more fair system and get people where they need to be. It's just, some people look at it cynically and they say, oh, nothing will change. But I will remind you that the only thing that we know is change happens. When my grandfather grew up, he grew up during the Great Depression. And throughout the arc of his entire life, he witnessed the Great Depression, World War II. He fought in the Korean War as part of the Frozen Chosen. He witnessed the Red Scare and hysteria, and everybody thought we were all going to die from hydrogen bombs. He witnessed the entire 1960s and the Cultural Revolution there. He witnessed the moon landing. He witnessed the IT and cable revolution. He helped invent the cable box. And then he witnessed the personal computing revolution. He witnessed the rise of the internet, and then he witnessed the rise of cell phones before he died. So imagine that over the arc of one life, seeing all these massive transformational changes and cultural changes. So there's no reason we can't endure the same. And the difference here is we have a lot more agency on what comes next. You know, if we come together with this type of technology, we have the means and ability to build things that not only are sustainable, they're fair. everybody gets a seat at the table, some small, some large, and everybody gets to feel like they're contributing towards something that's of mutual benefit.
What you just said is based on democracy is better, and that, the collected, gathered wisdom of human being is better than a really smart leader leading the world or the country or the region.
Yeah.
What is this idea based on?
Well, the wisdom of the crowds is a documented event. You can see it, and the caveat isn't just the masses are better, the incentivized masses are better.
Yes.
That's really the key.
Yes.
So if you're just voting and you have no stakes in the thing you're voting for, you're not going to make good decisions. But if there are stakes and you have an upside, you always tend to make better decisions. If you look at Robin Hanson's research with prediction markets, or any of the people that have studied them for years, they almost always make better decisions than regular everyday experts. So you see elections, and the prediction market tends to predict the election better than the talking heads that are on CNN or MSNBC or these other things. So what you need to do is create democratic processes, but create the appropriate incentives within those processes for people to participate and care about the outcomes. The other thing is that you have to give breathing space, and you have to layer time and expertise within these democratic systems. So where it's highly specialized, it's not the wisdom of the crowds, rather it's the delegation to a collection of experts who are of adversarial views. So you say, I'm going to build a nuclear power plant. You don't ask the group, you delegate to a committee, and that committee has the expertise necessary. And there are some for it, and there are some against it, and they kind of work together to try to figure it out. But they're sufficiently well credentialed, they can do that. What's cool is if you layer liquid democracy with that, you can create that system of delegated authority. You see, on this particular issue, I'm not qualified to vote. So I'm going to give my vote to Bob over there because he's a nuclear engineer and he's really, really skilled at this stuff, and he's worked on nuclear power plants for 30 years. So he's going to have a better opinion about whether we should build that nuclear power plant or not. And also, I don't really fully trust Bob, so I'm going to give 30% of my vote to Alice, and she's an activist and hates nuclear power plants. So Bob and Alice got to hammer it out and figure this thing, and maybe they'll come to a compromise, and if they want to get it done, that's the only way it's going to happen. That's what creates good outcomes. You have to have incentivized decision-making and incentivized wisdom of the crowds. And then expert systems help too. AI is so powerful because if it's used correctly, it provides a almost monarchical-like wisdom. It has this God mode where it can see the whole system, and it can give you a lot of really good advice, but it doesn't share our values. So while it can give us a lot of great advice, it doesn't have the wisdom to tell you what you ought to do or what's good for society. It just gives you the options, option A, B, C, D, and it can check the options that you're looking at and give you epistemic hygiene in that. Are you succumbing to cognitive fallacies and biases? Is the information credible? Has the data been checked? All these basic questions that take an enormous amount of time. How people kill a decision-making process is they overcomplicate it, and they try to kill you with information overload. They give you too much information. They give you too much stuff. It's almost like when you're dealing with a 5-year-old and they're telling you a story and they never get to the point, and they just keep babbling and babbling and babbling and babbling, and you're just like, shut the fuck up and tell me what you're actually asking here, okay?
Yeah.
Can I have some candy? Okay, you can have the candy, okay? I didn't need to know about the squirrel and the tree and the birds and the horses and the grasshoppers that you found and these other things. Well, that's modern society, is you get this information overload. What the AI does is it helps you filter it down. I use it every day now for that. Like, there's all these podcasts, and I've been on the Lex Friedman show and the Sean Ryan show and all these other things, and they end up being like 5-hour episodes. And so I always imagine, like, if I'm going to go watch a 5-hour podcast, do I have the time for that? Well, what if it's a dud? I've just wasted like a work day listening to this thing. So what's the first thing I do? I take the 5-hour podcast, I put it in Gemini, and I say, can you summarize everything that happened here? Is there anything interesting? Then it gives me a nice little text summary, and I read that, and then I decide based on that summary, do I want to engage with this podcast or not? So that's a great example of how you go from a huge, vast pile of raw information to now a curated thing, and it helps you focus and make a decision, do I want to engage, and what areas do I want to engage with? Like, maybe of those 5 hours, 30 minutes was really relevant to me in my job. So I'm going to focus in on just those 30 minutes and skip the other 4.5 hours of the podcast. You couldn't do that before.
You know what I did with the Sean Ryan show you went on?
Yeah.
I did the same thing.
Exactly right.
And there was one important note that it puts down, and it tells me, you said time's actually slow down, so the perception of time.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate a
Yeah,
little
the
on
timing.
that?
Well, that's a slightly different time. Those are time expansion experiences. So there's, I think it's Stephen Taylor who wrote the book, a psychologist who was really interested in humans' perception of time. So deep within your brain, in the limbic system, there's some regulating functions that change your perception of time. So time can either be very slow or time can actually move very quickly. So you may notice like when you're in a flow state, you're really in the zone, you get your music in, you do like 4 hours of work, but it only feels like 30 minutes. Or if you get like in a car accident, time like seems to slow down a little bit. And even though the accident occurred over like a 2-second period, it feels like a whole minute has been stretched out. And you're kind of like seeing everything in slow motion.
Yeah.
So that's called a time expansion experience. And what he was really interested in is that certain drugs, like salvia and DMT and others, actually can influence a time expansion experience and give you extraordinary time expansion. Salvia in particular, if you take a heroic dose, there's been accounts of people that lived another lifetime. So the real clock time was only just a few minutes of clock time, but then they report living like years in another person's life. There was a person in Alaska who took, because he got the extract ratios wrong, too much of it. He collapsed on his bathroom floor, and then he woke up in Texas in another body as another person, married, had kids, worked at Walmart. He's living this life for several years, and then he wakes up again on the bathroom floor in Alaska with his roommate, and he's like, oh God, where the fuck am I? Where's my wife? Where's my kids?
Isn't that just called tripping?
Yeah, it's just crazy when you think about it. But that's called a time expansion experience, and you can experience it on ketamine or DMT or any of these other things because it affects the parts of the brain that are there. And there's even people that are studying, can they tinker with time expansion for elite operators, like using transcranial magnetic stimulation or focused ultrasound? Can you use that to actually, like when you're a Navy SEAL group or something like that, everybody has hyper-perception and they have bullet time, basically. So there's some really cool use cases here for these types of things. And I have a lot of friends that work in that space, so I kind of geek out from time to time.
You've been super successful right now. You talk about incentives. Is financial incentives still a thing for you?
No, it's never been. If it was, I would have stopped a really long time ago. I gave away all my ether to my secretary. It was 293,000 ether. So I didn't know it was going to be worth that much at the time, but it hadn't launched yet. But it's never been a thing. I've been in Bitcoin since it was $1 and beyond, and it's gone up, it's gone down. It's always been about the work and the love of the work. The biggest sin you can commit is get to attach to the lifestyle. You get attached to the jet, you get attached to the ranch, you get attached to these things. They're nice, they're beautiful, they're a lot of fun. Believe me, when you're traveling and you have a 4-hour layover and like you get on the plane and there's a guy farting next to you, everything. He's like, I want to get out of this. Okay, this is bad. But at the same time, it's like that's not what defines you. What defines you is the people you meet, the interactions you have, the things you build, and ultimately what you leave behind and the meaning you derive from that life. So if you fall in love with the things and you make your life about that, you live a life of fear. Because you wake up every day saying, what if this all disappears? What if this all disappears? I have to make more money. I have to make more. And then everything becomes transactional. Every relationship, every interaction, everything you do, you don't look for who is this person and try to get to know them and have empathy for them. You're saying, how can this person benefit me? How can this interview I'm doing right now make the price of X, Y, and Z go up? Instead of, how do I just have a good conversation with this person and share some wisdom, and they share some wisdom with me. So it's bad to go down that road, and nothing good comes of it. And I know so many billionaires who are divorced and miserable, and they have just miserable lives, and their children hate them, and they say, oh, look at all this money and power I have. And I say, great, but your personal life is just a fucking train wreck. Why are you here? Why are you doing this? Well, that's just the nature of the game. No, it doesn't really have to be that way. Start with being a good person, start with a life of meaning, and start doing what you love. And if you make the money, you make the money. You don't make the money, you don't make the money. They say, oh, that's easy for you to say. Charles, you're rich. I say, I wasn't rich when I started.
Yeah.
I was broke. I ran input-output the first year on $200,000, and that included everyone's salary, my salary. I was staying at hotels where, like, the bed bugs had bed bugs. It was hardcore. It was real hard, and every month we had to figure out how to make payroll and scrape by. And I lived that way for quite some time. And yeah, we got fortunate, and the markets moved to the moon. But even if it hadn't happened, I'd still be here, and I'd still be working because I love what I do, and I love this idea of being able to give everybody a system like this.
You know, time definitely slows down when I'm talking to you. I have a gift for you. I have a gift. I have a special delivery for you. Our team literally just went and buy some McDonald's for you.
Why, thank you very much. Would you like some fries with that?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Charles.
this was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Here, let's get a picture together.
Thank you. Thank you.